Hi everyone, welcome back to Long Game, a Heated Rivalry podcast. My name is Declan, this is Silvan, and today we are finally looking into the Heated Rivalry book. So we are taking this a bit by bit, so we're going to do basically maybe 4 episodes on this in its entirety, and we'll go through the first 8 chapters in this first part. Now, we've been really excited for this, me in particular, because I already read these books before the TV show came out, but Sylvan hadn't. So there was so many stuff I was having to bite my tongue with because there's like things that you miss whenever you're not reading the books and the show sort of has to leave out. And so I was just so interested in how it was contrasting for me, but I needed to hear Sylvan's thoughts as well. So we can finally get those. But we'll just start with Sylvan, what are your general thoughts? Because you've read up to chapter 8 so far, and then you've chosen to stop there so that we can, do a proper flow for the podcast. What have you thought of these first few chapters?
Yeah, that's right. And for anyone who's following along and reading with us, you know, so the first 8 chapters basically cover episodes 1 and 2 from the TV show. So
Mm.
if you're just wondering like where we're at, that's where we're at. My general thoughts on what I've read so far is a question actually. Is this book written better than Game Changer? Because I feel it is. However, I feel like I'm biased because I like these two characters. And so I'm not sure. I'm on the fence.
So, from my personal experience, this book is better than Game Changers. I think it's a better written book. I still don't think it's her best written book. Um, in terms of like where it ranks for me in this sort of series of 6 books, this is like I think it's like third best. So I think people have an idea of this book that's based on the long game, the sixth book, the final book, and people read these two as a duology. And when you're doing it like that, it makes sense. But when you're reading this book on its own, I don't think it's as good. So it's not. Obviously, the book itself in general is good and it's fun, and Ilya and Shane are really, really interesting characters, and you can really get into it with them. And their love story is very sweet, and there's a real sense of longing and belonging, and it's all that good stuff. But in terms of like writing quality, Rachel Reed gets better after this book, and I think the long game is like her sort of perfecting Shane and Ilya's story. So I find that whenever people read this book first, they're like, this is good, but it's not what I was expecting. And that was my general experience. But then as I read on and finished the long game, I was like, yeah, no, I can see that these two belong together, if that makes sense.
It's so interesting because even, having finished Game Changer and moved on to Heated Rivalry, I'm like, this feels like a better written book. It feels like the pacing is better for me. And I'm conflicted because we were very critical about Game Changer, and the comments prove that. And I love hearing other people's, opposing views, of course. But I'm also biased because we love Ilya and Shane so much. And I was wondering, is my judgment of these two characters clouding my ability to be really objective about the writing here?
Um, that's a great question because I've never had to think of it that way because I read the books before I seen the show. So I don't fully associate Connor Story and Hudson Williams with these characters completely. Obviously, now when I reread it, I do see them, but for some reason they still do feel like separate entities to me. Not in the same way that I talked about previously, like whenever I read The Hunger Games, I can only see Jennifer Lawrence. With these books, whenever I went back and reread them, I wasn't experiencing that. I still have a different image in my head of a book and Shane Ilya. I feel like they're slightly different. And maybe we'll get into that some, but yeah, it's interesting now that you feel that your sort of perspective on the book is a bit clouded because these characters, you associate them so strongly with the TV characters, which I mean, controversially say are better written. I do
I,
think
I, I,
that.
I can see that. I can see why you're saying that.
So it could just be that, but I will like go out on a limb and say that this is not the best book that's been written, even in the MM romance genre. It is still fun. It's still entertaining, and there's a reason why Jacob Tierney wanted to adapt it. And there is good quality writing in this, but it's definitely not the best that Rachel Reed can do. We do find out that she can do a lot better as her series progresses, and that she's more willing to introduce more complex themes and characters, and in particular delve into mental health issues a lot more, and for your characters and through their journey. So I feel like she's still finding her confidence in this book, though she has written some really, really fascinating characters and really, really fun character and relationship dynamics that make this book enjoyable regardless.
And as you were talking, I was sort of getting excited about reading the rest of the series because, in a way, I won't have this image of Hudson and Connor for the next few books, at least until the long game, and I can almost form my own characters in my own head and develop that as I would have any other book, for example. Um, so that's interesting. So you're saying better writing is to come and more complex characters are coming. Um, and that makes me want to keep going in a way.
Yeah, yeah. And the thing is, Shane and Ilya become more complicated. Like the version of them in the long game, in like retrospective, when you're looking at Heated Rivalry after you finish the long game, you're like, yeah, the signs are there, and like there's elements of their character. It's definitely there that she then develops on, but she doesn't go into the complexities of these guys in the same way that she does in that book. So I can look at it kind of with like rose tinted glasses, um, and that's where I get my idea of Heated Rivalry. But yeah, there is more to come, but there's plenty to enjoy in this book first.
Yeah. Should we delve into this book?
We shall. And I think a good one to start off with is how did you find this version of Ilya and Shane?
That's a really good question, actually. I feel like Ilya was lifted right from the book onto our TV screen. I feel like, Connor Story did a really good job at encapsulating the character of Ilya so well that there doesn't feel like there's this big disparity between book Ilya and TV show Ilya for me. What
Yeah,
were your
yeah.
thoughts? What were your thoughts on Ilya in the
I
book?
agree. I think Connor's story, the way that he adapts Ilya's character, it's nearly verbatim, like it is so close to the book version. The only difference I think is that people might not like me saying this, but I think book Ilya is funnier. I
Yes.
I think he is a funnier character. I think his jokes just land better, and I think like his internal monologue is funnier. Like there's like a real like childishness to the way that he like thinks about certain things that come across in a really, really entertaining way. That is very difficult to translate to screen. So it is. I think that humor with Ilya on screen can be a bit more stilted. Um, but to be honest, I just do think the book version is funnier. But in terms of like getting us to invest in a character and getting us to care, I do feel like Connor Story's acting and the way in which he delivers the character is much more convincing in that regard. But yeah, they're so close together, so they are.
Yeah.
They did a fantastic job of adapting that character.
Yeah, and because you were talking about how funny Ilya is, you get that right from the beginning in the book. Whereas I feel like in the TV show, you do get elements of it, but he gets funnier as the TV show progresses. So, like
Yeah.
by episode like 4, 5, and 6, you are like appreciating the comedic value of Ilya,
Yeah.
the character.
Yeah, 100%. And I think a lot of that has to do with the idea that Um, so much of the beginning of this book is just the boys internally monologuing. And so a lot of that humor happens on the inside and it's happening in their minds and you can enjoy it as a reader. But obviously you can't translate that easily to, like the screen. Um, though there is clever ways that they do it through text messaging and things like that there, you can see that in the show. I do think that's some of the best humor that is delivered in terms of Ilias' character. Like the sexting and stuff that he does and the taunting he does of Shane is just really, really fun. But yeah, naturally it's just going to be difficult to translate certain sort of inner monologues in terms of like going from book to TV show. And I think you find that more with Shane's character, I think, is probably the harder one to adapt.
Yeah, and speaking of Shane, I feel like Shane is almost a different character in the book. He's so different to what the TV show depicts him as. For starters, he doesn't even drink ginger ale. He drinks beer in the book.
Yeah, yeah, crazy.
I, I
Like
think that was the most shocking thing of all for me.
it's because we make such a big deal of it. I don't know. Does he then start drinking ginger ale later on? Because you've only read up to chapter 8 so far, so
I'll
we'll
find
see. We'll
out.
see.
Who
We'll find
knows?
out.
But
But
what were your thoughts on Shane? Because I have like notes on this.
so Shane in the book, I quite like his character. I think he's quite engaging. Um, there's more of like I think there's more of like a mental turmoil to Shane in the book than can be like fully displayed on the screen. I think Hudson Williams is working with a character that's very difficult to um, you know,
Yeah,
emulate on screen because so much of what's happening with him is happening internally. And he does a fantastic job of expressing that through his eyes, through his emotions. Um, like, can you imagine walking up to an actor and go, "Here's a character. He is like emotionally turbulent inside, and you need to express that, but not too well because he's also on the spectrum, so he doesn't always outwardly emote what he's feeling." So it's like how do you even do that? But somehow he manages to create a version of the character that does that justice. But you can only do it to a certain extent. Hearing Shane's true thoughts and the way that he thinks in this book is very revealing, and you learn more about him in that sense, and about the way he sort of thinks and feels and operates and views certain things. I also think that he's more jockish in this book.
yes.
Um, he seems more like one of the guys and less of like an awkward geek. Um, so yeah, that's some of the elements I picked up on. What about you? What have your general thoughts been?
So I know Rachel has discussed about Shane being autistic or being on the spectrum or being neurodivergent, and I don't get that from the book. I don't get the you know some of those traits that are so obvious on the TV show, and maybe it's because we have a visual representation of some of the body language and the lack of eye connection and things like that that really work on a TV medium. But to me that doesn't come across in the book, at least not yet. He
Mm.
does come across as one of the lads, I'm gonna say. um he swears, he does all of that kind of stuff, whereas Shane doesn't.
No.
And so for me, this feels like a little bit of a different character, and I like the way Jacob Tierney has almost lifted this character and given the character of Shane so many different layers. And you can see, and as you were saying, that you're absolutely right, you can see how Hudson Williams has weaved through those layers in such a way that sort of it envelops over the course of the episode. So even with the TV show, I didn't automatically think, oh, Shane's autistic. It was only through some more discourse and as the TV shows kept airing, the episodes kept airing, that I thought, there's something a bit different.
Yeah, yeah. He's not reacting and behaving in the way that you would expect. And I think in the TV show, that's presented a lot better. I think initially within the book, um, the subcontext is sort of there. But to be honest, I don't think Rachel Reed fully committed to the idea of having Shane be autistic until Long Game. I think his
Interesting.
traits are a lot stronger in that book, a lot more obvious. So we're kind of working with hindsight here. So it's sort of like a little bit of corrective writing where it's becoming a lot more obvious. Um, because Shane has other struggles in that book as well, that are more tied to his neurodiversity and more tied to his mental health. And I'll not say anything more than that, but definitely the idea to fully lean into the idea that Shane is autistic in the TV show is definitely lent to his character, and I think it makes him more understandable, also more relatable as well in a lot of ways. Like I see a lot of people in Shane in the
Yeah.
TV show. Whereas in the book, he's just a bit more stereotypical in Heated Rivalry, book version. He's just a stereotypical jock. He's just trying to be straight-laced and perfect all the time, and he does have a mean competitive streak, and he is quite organized, and he's a little maybe OCD. But the traits aren't developed as fully as they are in the TV show. But obviously, TV show writers get to work in hindsight. They get these characters and they can flush them out and do a lot more with them than the opera might have originally thought. But knowing then that Rachel works in tandem with Jacob Tierney and the other writers to flush these characters out, obviously it's still her baby, it's still her characters. But yeah, the difference is definitely there. Like they're not completely identical, not in the way that sort of Ilya and Connor's story might be.
Definitely. And I'm wondering what you thought of the pacing initially for the book was like for you when you read it.
So in terms of the pacing, um, I think the pacing makes sense when you read Heated Rivalry and Long Game as a duology. I don't think it's as cohesive when you're just reading Heated Rivalry. It feels like this is half the story. Um, and I imagine Rachel Reed definitely did intend to return to these characters because Ilya reoccurs, so he does. He like makes little cameos throughout the other books. And so it's clearly always an intention for her to go back and revisit these characters. But whenever I finished this book, it did feel unfinished. It didn't feel like a standalone so much, like the other books have been. So yeah, that does mean that the pacing is a little different. I think as you read more of this book and towards the end of it, you'll realize what I'm talking about. But for what it's trying to convey, it does work. Um, I just feel like there's ways of making it work better that sort of flow with the development of their relationship a bit better. I think there's a bit too much focus on maybe the physical element of their relationship rather than so much the emotional. I think in the TV show it's better paced, and you get those emotional beats a lot earlier than you do in the book, and that's sort of my general thought on that.
Definitely. And you can see this commonality with Game Changer. You know, there is such an emphasis on the physical stuff, on the sex. And that's something that Rachel definitely carries through into Heated Rivalry. So, in a way, to quote Hilary Duff, let's go back to the beginning. So, the way this book opens is actually with a prologue. So, that's a little bit different already from Game Changer.
Yes, that's right.
And you get smacked in the face in the prologue. Like, I was reading it thinking I was going to be reading, you know, the beginning of episode 1 from the TV show. And so you almost get this prologue that jumps 7 years into their situationship, their relationship, whatever you want to call it at that point.
Yeah, yeah,
And I was very confused. And then you get smacked with a fuck ton of sex.
yeah. Like
I
this
was
book.
not expecting that.
So this book starts off at like 11. So it does, it like throws you right in, and it's I think it's kind of works. Because it just goes in and goes, "Oh my God, these guys have so much chemistry," and yet one of them is like they have this like heated they literally have this heated moment together that's then undercut by like, oh my God, I am like in over my head with this guy. Like he just goes, he leaves, and what am I doing anymore? And how the hell did I get here? Well, let me tell you exactly how you got here. So I do like that element of it. I think it's interesting. Um, but it's kind of like that. How did we get here? That's sort of what this prologue is doing. And I think it's interesting that they decide to do a prologue that in the future rather than in the past, which is a nice little subversion of expectations. But yeah, you were taken off guard by it, I take it.
Definitely. And I was even thinking about like why do they even use a prologue? What does it achieve? And I think you were right. I think it really does sort of make the story stand out right from the beginning and it catches you off guard. It's not the slow burn type of start you're expecting. You're almost dropped right in the middle of it and then you're like, "Oh, now we're going to rewind."
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think this for me explains a little bit of the pacing issue that I have with this book. And it's that she's going with a structure of like physically straight in there, these guys are going to be physically together, they're going to have lots of sex, and then we are going to build the emotional relationship then. And that's exactly what happens in the show. But those emotional beats of building the relationship do not come frequently enough in the first half of this book. And I think that affects that pacing. It affects that idea that she's running with, which is actually really clever. The idea of going in really physical and doing all the sex and the smut, but have it become more meaningful throughout as their relationship and emotion begins to build between the two. Um, which seems to be the point of starting the prologue like this, having it bang straight into the sex. But she needs more emotional beats, the same sort of emotional beats that you find in the show, like you know that one wherever Ilya is leaving Shane's apartment that he bought, the big apartment complex, and they share that kiss on the stairs. You won't find that in here, even though it's a very important emotional moment between the two. And it's little moments like that there I feel like are just missing from this, just affect pacing a little bit. But yeah, I got distracted.
No, it's so true. And in a way I was thinking about how we were very critical, let's be honest, about the amount of sex that was in Game Changer and how
Mm,
superfluous it was and how it didn't drive the story forward. But for some reason, and again, this is where I think I'm a little bit biased now, I didn't mind the amount of there was sex pretty much in every chapter up until chapter 8.
yeah,
Like there's pretty much a sex scene in every chapter. And for some reason I didn't mind it as much. And maybe it's because it's still, part one of the book, and so it hasn't become repetitive to a point where it becomes, in Ilya's words, boring. Um but why do we accept the amount of sex that we get right from the beginning in this book when in Game Changer it felt like a slog to get through sometimes?
because it's not boring. Is the long and short of it. It's exciting, it's secret, it's dangerous, it could ruin their careers. Every time they meet each other and have sex, they are like adding a little bit of emotional connection between each other. Every time they meet, you're like, oh my God, they are like falling more and more and more in love. There is something going on in the background. The more these two have sex, the more time they spend together, the more you know that they're going to like each other even more. And you're waiting for that cathartic moment of like, I love you. This is always meant to be. And oh my God, it's so much more than physical about us. And I'm getting too attached. It's because that is happening and building in the background every single time it happens. The sex in this has purpose, so it does, and it has interesting purpose. It's an exciting setup. It increases the emotional sort of stakes as it goes on, and so you don't mind the sex because the sex means that they're getting closer.
It felt like it was also a lot hotter. Like the sex is not
I
so vanilla.
think she
It's
got better at writing it.
right. I think she might have consulted one of her gay besties or something. Like, how does this actually work?
No,
Because,
there is definitely an improvement in her writing more intimate scenes. Definitely, it's a lot better in this book.
and I'm even thinking about the way she writes the sex scenes. Like you said, they are better written now. They're a bit more detailed. There's that danger element. But I'm reading this out in public and I'm not feeling, flushed or, oh my gosh, I can't be reading this in public kind of thing. What am I trying to say? I'm not necessarily feeling turned on by the sex scenes, if I'm honest. I'm
Mm.
reading them because they're part of the story. I don't know how that lands with other people when they're reading it.
Yeah, I think you're right, and I think it's just down to maybe a sense of build-up. It's not really there, like mm, the waiting for it to happen, the will they, won't they, like it's not there. It's like that building of anticipation. So, when you're watching a horror movie and like a jump scare comes out of nowhere and like it wasn't built up, the tension wasn't there, you weren't like sitting in anxiety waiting for something to happen. It's ineffective because there is no build up. And so I feel like when it comes to like romance and things like that, the same rule sort of applies. You need to build it up. You need to build that anticipation, that sort of waiting for it to happen to make it feel like satisfying because it's like, oh my God, will they, won't they? We've been waiting so long for this. This is so tense. Oh my God, I can't wait any longer. This is crazy. And I think the same rule applies here. Um, but because of the way that the story is structured and the kind of story that Rachel Reed's trying to tell, it doesn't really allow so much for that anticipation in terms of their like intimacy. So yeah, it's sadly like an after effect of the way that she's telling the story. Now, I think the show maybe does it better.
That told a
Um,
whole other story, let me tell
that's a
you.
whole other story. That's a visual medium that doesn't count. So that might have some more to do with it. Um, but yeah, generally, I think it's just an anticipation thing.
Yeah, and even when we think about sort of as we progress through the prologue and we get to sort of chapter one, even chapter one feels like it picks up right where the beginning of episode one starts.
Yeah,
And in a way, this is the starting I was almost expecting. So having that prologue really gave me whiplash in a way that the TV show gave me whiplash with all the time jumps and you had to really keep track of
yeah,
everything.
yeah,
This, I don't get that sense of whiplash here as I'm reading through the chapters in terms of pacing because it's very clear. It says like December 2008, January 2011. Like, you know,
yeah.
I can match the timeline and I can sort of go through it in my head as I'm reading and I'm not trying to figure it out in a way. It's delivering the timeline on a platter for the reader, which makes it easier for me.
Yeah, and I do think it works better in a book format. I actually wish more MM romance writers would take the time to just give their characters like literal time to be together, to build themselves up. It's very important that you do have these time jumps because it builds greater sort of like a greater connection between Ilya and Shane. Like this thing is built on shared experience and time together. Whereas a lot of offers like don't bother with that. It's like you're in love after 3 days and now you're getting married after the fourth. Like I hate that.
Kip and Scott.
Kip and Scott, yeah, they're like no. So she is doing things in this book which I'm really happy with because I didn't quite like them whenever they were done in Game Changer the way that she did. So I'm really happy that she's made certain changes in Heated Rivalry where it makes it flow a bit better. Um, but yeah, I do generally find that maybe when you're reading books, time skips make a bit more sense because you have time to explain them too, can explain what happens. Whereas, every time you cut back to Shane like 3 years later, he's not going to turn to the camera and go, and in this time, we've been doing this here, and I've been missing Ilya so much, and we've been seeing him back and forth. Blah, blah, blah. So he's not having like a Fleabag break the fourth wall moment where he just like explains
Right.
to the camera what's happened. But yeah, it's just sort of like a byproduct of the change in medium. So it is. Obviously, the time skips are important, so they need to include them, and they do in this show. So it's not always the best way to communicate sort of change, but I think they do what they can with it.
And I think that she does it really well. For me, it helps me build up expectation and realism in a way. It's been a year, it's been 3 months. So it's not just like with Kip and Scott, it's been literal weeks and they're professing their love to each other and they're moving in and things like that. It's like, I love, how Lizzie spoke on our podcast a couple of episodes ago, like U-Haul lesbian esque, because it's true. They do move so fast. I'm like, I don't know how much I'm buying this, but in Heated Rivalry, I'm buying it a little bit more. You know, the time seems to be separated a little bit more realistically for me.
Yeah, it makes sense for two athletes that are closeted to stretch this out the way that they are and being terrified of confessing feelings because the minute they do, this becomes a lot more serious and a lot more complicated. So you buy into the idea that they would literally spend years just being content with hooking up and sometimes talking and like, but never anything like overly serious. And it's when it gets serious that it gives the book the kick up the ass to really get us going then into the third act.
But that's realistic for, I'm not going to say all, but a lot of gay relationships and how they start. If you think about, you know, when Grindr sort of came onto the scene and a lot of people were hooking up already. So Grindr didn't invent that. That's not what I'm saying. But when you think about a lot of gay relationships that I've been sort of exposed to through friends and such, a lot of them started by hooking up and it stayed as a hookup type of culture for a really long time until, you know, it progressed to getting a bit more serious and then progressed to, the step beyond that. And to me, this feels like they're two 17-year-olds. Of course, they're going to be hooking up. They have hormones surging through their bodies. Like, they're not
Yeah.
thinking, this is the man that I want to spend the rest of my life with. I mean, Shane has a fucking girlfriend in the book.
Yeah, yeah, that's right. Yeah,
What?
he starts his hockey camp with a girlfriend. Obviously, she doesn't last long, like, but
Well, thank God.
thank God. Yeah, let's not get into that. Um, but yeah, it does make sense for their characters, for their age. Like, they're not really thinking about the long-term possible repercussions of what they're doing. They're not thinking about how attached they're becoming. So that when it does finally happen, they're like, oh shit, like, what the hell did I do here? Because I did not plan for this to happen at all, and now I'm freaking the fuck out. So that
Right?
works. That's good drama. And it plays into a realism in their age, which is a realism in their characters. And it means that we can buy into it as well. Like, it works for me. Um, kept falling in love with Scott and never leaving his house after meeting him the first time. Not so much.
No, no. I think one of the things that I missed about some of the references in the TV show, and this is coming from, I was literally listening to this episode of the Loon Call podcast, and they had some of the editors from the show on their podcast, and they were talking about some of the sounds. Obviously, as an editor, you're editing around sound and as well as the visuals, and they talked about how, the very first time you meet these characters is the lighter, and you hear the lighter. And
Yeah.
in my head, I was playing the lighter noise because that's so, for me, synonymous about how they met. And that's one of the things that I think with any book, and not just Rachel Reed, is you miss sound. You miss the inflections of the tone of voices.
Mhm.
You miss the background noise and you're sort of filling it in, but that's not something that I'm filling in naturally. I fill in the visuals when I'm reading. I'm not
Yeah.
always filling in the sound unless it's explicitly stated on the
Yeah.
page. Like they're walking down the streets of New York, and I'm like, okay, it's busy, it's noisy, it's all that kind of thing.
Mhm.
And that to me is what makes the TV show just so special.
Yeah. I mean, what clever storytelling is that? Like, what is that telling you? You see a lighter, you don't see a lighter, you hear a lighter, flick, spark, and then meet the two guys that are now meeting each other for the first time. What just happened? Oh my God, they have a spark. There's romance there. There's a passion. There's a fire. There's a flame. There's oh my God, there's an attraction there. Clever way of storytelling, and that's one of the best things about adaptation is that you can have a story delivered in a way that's completely different from when for how you originally consumed it, and you get someone's creative spin on how they've visualized it themselves, either through cinematography, mise en scène, through sound, through lighting, through color. Like, you have a new repertoire of things that you can use to explain and tell a story. And that's the beauty of how it's been translated to the screen in this way, that you can include things like this here. You can use sound to give subtle clues and context to what's going on between these two characters, rather than just having a book which would just explain it to you. So, yeah, it's just a very lovely idea about adaptation in general. That you do have this really inspiring change of medium that can present you a story in a completely different context.
Exactly. And for me, what it does, it makes me appreciate how Jacob Tierney and the team adapted the material from this book. Like, holy shit, they did a really good job. For me, they elevated the material, at least from what I've read so far,
Yeah.
and to the TV show. And a lot of the dialogue is pulled from the book. So this
Mhm.
isn't to sort of disservice Rachel Reed at all, because I'm reading some of the dialogue. I'm like, that's pretty much what they say on the TV show. And so a
Yeah.
lot of this is pulled, but it feels elevated for me so far.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's the benefit of having like lots of very talented creatives look at your work and turning it into something different. And I can imagine for a lot of authors, that's sort of like a dream to have people that are so talented take an interest in your work and turn it into something that's completely different to what you imagined, but still doing honor to how much effort and work and creativity you put into it yourself. So Yeah, I like that they took literally a surgical scalpel to this story and thought of ways to enhance the sort of viewing experience. I cannot find this very common in media these days, this level of effort and this level of consideration for how a story is told and how it's communicated. Um, and they decide to do it with a romance book. Like, yeah, and what happened was they were able to deliver a story to the masses in a way that other people haven't in a very long time. Like, you haven't really gotten a popular show like this representing a gay relationship since like Brokeback Mountain. Like, never has it reached a level of popularity since like then, where it becomes like pop culture. So it does, like Brokeback Mountain is pop culture. Um, Heartstopper is sort of pop culturally significant as well. And now Heated Rivalry is also like that. But it's whenever you take the care and the attention and you just pour everything you can into it and create a beautiful piece of art, people will line up for that, for stuff that has heart and soul put into it and effort and it feels genuine. And that's I think what makes this adaptation work so well.
Yeah, it's because they took it seriously. I mean, Brokeback Mountain was a book as well, or a novella, I can't remember, but I remember reading the book Brokeback Mountain, and so they took Heated Rivalry seriously. They could have easily made this a very commercialized Netflix esque, smutty sort of 360, is it 365 or 360 days type of series where it's a bit like they
They
were in
could
the
have made
campy. That's what I was thinking. Like, they could have made this campy, and they
they could
didn't.
have made red, white, and royal blue.
Oh, we need to do a whole other podcast on red, white, and royal blue. I know where you're coming from. I know where you're coming from. We're gonna
Let
have
me
so
tell
many
you right
arguments.
now,
We're gonna have so
that
many
book,
arguments.
that adaptation, there is a world apart for these two shows. And funny, the original source material, not significantly different in terms of writing. So it's not like they're not significantly, one is not significantly better than the other in terms of like the books, but the way in which they're adapted and delivered for the TV could not be more different. Could not be more different. But maybe that's a discussion we'll get into.
Definitely. I think we just need Jacob to adapt everything for us from here on out. Just do
Yeah,
everything.
if it's gay, just
Take
make
my money.
it.
And I was thinking about sort of like how the chapters progress. So when we get to chapter 3, and even with chapter 2, even I'm thinking, okay, who's the narrator in this chapter? Because Rachel Reed writes in the third person, and it's been a thought that's been sort of on my mind since we started Game Changer. She writes in a third person, and in a lot of books, at least in a lot of sort of not romances, but just gay themed or books I've read, is from the perspective of that character per chapter. So it's written almost in a first person kind of way. But Rachel
Mm,
Reed writes in third person. I wasn't expecting that with Game Changer. And I think it's maybe because it's been a trend more recently to do it that way. And of course, she would have written the books a long time ago. And
mm,
so even when I'm looking at the chapters, I'm like, right, who's the narrator of this chapter? And I don't know how you feel, but I feel like in the TV show, and they've got equal billing, please don't come at me, but I feel like Shane's story is the main character arc of the TV show. Whereas just because of his journey, and a lot of people can identify with that, and not to say that Ilya's journey is not significant at all. I probably identify with Ilya's journey more than Shane's personally.
mm.
But in the book, I feel like Ilya's the main character here. He starts off narrating a lot of he starts narrating like chapter 1, chapter 3. Like he's narrating a lot of these chapters.
Mm, yeah. Um, this is so interesting because you're right. Ilya is very often the point of view character, you could say, as in like the narrative is following him and his perception of what's going on. Um, I genuinely think it's just because Rachel Reed liked to write Ilya more. Because I think the actual story, in terms of the plot of where it's going, is about Shane. I think it's really Shane's experience. Ilya is a huge, important part of it. He's definitely a main character, but I don't think he is the like central character. He's not the one that the story is actually really centered around. It's not really his character journey. Um, he is much more accepting of who he is than Shane is, and this book is really about acceptance in terms of Shane's journey too. So I just find that this book is Shane's, and because I've read the long game, I know that that long game is Ilya's,
Ah,
because it's suddenly a
say
lot more
less.
about him. So it is. I'm just going to say that I genuinely think it's just because Rachel Reed likes to write Ilya more than she likes to write Shane. I feel like she likes doing his voice more, and that's why it's sort of divided up like that. But in terms of who the story is centered around, I think it is Shane. And I think every one of these books does have a main character. Like the main character of Game Changers is uh oh, now that I'm thinking about it. Originally I always thought that these books all had a main character. Even though you get two dual point of views, you're supposed to have two main characters. But I always thought it was the hockey players, but I think that Game Changers it's Kip.
I would agree. As soon as you said that, I was like, it's Kip's story.
Yeah, it's about him growing up and learning to value himself and not accept second best. And that change in Kip is what drives the change in Scott. Um, but yeah, maybe another reason why Game Changers just isn't quite, it's not the best one. Because all the other books, like the third book, which is about Ryan, it's very much his story. Fourth book, it's about Eric, very much his story. Well, oh no, no, it's not. It's not. No. Oh my God, I'm going off on a tangent in my head. I'm gonna be like the guy with the conspiracy board in the background soon. Um, but no, I will settle on the idea that there's definitely one main character per book. There's one usual central character journey that everyone is following, and then the other character is part of that. And I think in this
And
book it's
it's Shane. Yeah, I can see why, but I feel like there's a lot more narration from Ilya, and as you
Mhm.
said rightfully, perhaps Rachel likes writing for Ilya, and that's certainly what's coming across very early on. And in a way, just to throw back to Game Changer, I almost feel like that would have been a more compelling book in sucking us into the storyline if Scott's journey through that and through, the NHL and all that kind of stuff was the main character arc, and Kip was sort of, he added to it in the periphery, but
Yeah,
he was
he
also
would be
going
like
through
the catalyst
the
for
B
change.
plot.
Mm.
Yes.
Yeah,
And I wonder if that would have made me more interested in Game Changer, more invested in Game
yeah.
Changer, because
Mm.
Scott is the more interesting character.
Yeah, like the stakes are much higher for him. Like his life is on the line, like his career in terms of his livelihood and stuff is on the line. And yet it's all about Kip learning to value himself rather than Scott learning to reprioritize what he wants in life.
Yeah.
But he does do that, but it's only because Kip changes internally and decides that enough is enough. Um, and so yeah, the character journey for Scott's lost a little bit. He doesn't become the focus anymore, and then his change is like that. Like we barely. I
U-Haul
feel like we don't do
lesbian.
a lot of that POV. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very. Yeah.
I can see a point in at least so far in Shane being the main character, because it's, and I wrote notes on it makes me laugh because I wrote I annotated my books, and I wrote, is Ilya Shane's gay awakening? Because he talks about Friday Night Lights, and I did not even know Friday Night Lights was going to come into this book. And we talk about Friday Night Lights with in our episode with Lizzie,
Mhm.
and because he talks about the guy from Friday Night Lights, and I'm like, is he talking about Taylor Kitsch? Because that guy is ridiculously handsome, and he's got the long hair and the body and the bravado, and I'm like, Taylor Kitsch's character is very similar to Ilya's,
Yeah, it could be that that was a sexual awakening, and then he's seen Ilya, and he's like, "Oh my God, you're my type,"
right?
for better or for worse. But
Yeah.
yeah, that's an interesting little thought. Yeah, I hadn't even thought of that, but yeah, I think as soon as the two of them seen each other, though, it was instant. Like, you're exactly what I want.
Yeah, and I think where the TV show really elevates some of the material is where I see this in chapter 4, for example, when they're shooting the advertisement of the commercial. And from the TV show, we get more perspective in that it was Ilya that was really driving that. That's not in the book. It's not
Yeah,
specified. It just feels like it's something that their agents might have put together and they're just having
yeah,
to do it. And so
hmm
there's this intention and this interest from Ilya in the TV show that I get very early on. And I'm like, he wants him. He definitely
yeah,
wants him.
yeah,
Whereas here, it's almost like they're just being put into situations together, and the proximity is what sort of helps guide that attraction to where we get to.
yeah. It's Jacob Tierney's making an important shift in that they're being more proactive in their relationship. So Ilya is proactively going after Shane now. It's just like a little point that just shows that Ilya really wants him. And it's not just a coincidence. It's not just they just happen to be in the right place at the right time. It's that I've met you. I'm gonna have you one way or another, and I'm gonna make it happen. And so I'm gonna manufacture a situation in which me and you are gonna be together, and I'm gonna see if I can make something happen. Ilya's very proactive in that sense. Whereas in the book, it's just sort of they just happen to be put together, right place, right time.
Yeah, and I want to workshop an idea, and I'm going to get a lot of comments, I'm sure. But in chapter 4 specifically, Ilya is described as quote unquote manly. Now, I have a problem with this. The
Okay.
reason why I have a problem with this is I get what they're trying to do. They're trying to, describe Ilya as this like, is he like 6'2", 6'4", or something, like big Russian, curly hair. I get what they're trying to do with that, but what I don't like in doing that is in describing Ilya specifically as manly, because they don't describe Shane as manly, is they're falling into this trope that the top is manly and the bottom isn't.
Hmm.
And this is where I'm like, not sure I'm liking that actually.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't really thought of that, but that's true. Yeah, and it is a common trope in MM romance books too. But it also opens up the opportunity to subvert that. And now I read a lot of MM romance books where that is subverted. And there's one in particular, the Vitali brothers, where one of them is this big, huge guy, and he is like, he's a killer. He's all these things. He's like stereotypical jock. He's a big Labrador, um, but he's the bottom to this young, skinny guy with no confidence, no idea what he's doing. Typical sort of description of twink, and he is the top throughout the entire relationship. And so I like it when it's subverted, it makes it more interesting. But considering that this is her earlier works and she does um, explore different sort of dynamics as the books go on, um, yeah, I think it's just a sign of just earlier in romance writing, to be honest.
Yeah, and
Um,
I wonder if this is also like, of the time of when she was writing this book, and maybe this trope was quite prominent. I'm not saying that it was correct or not, but it's quite
yeah.
prominent. And I don't know. I just feel like we've definitely in 2026 shifted away from tops being manly and bottoms being feminine. That's not what I see with my friends, for example. It's not what I
Mhm.
see in a lot of other pieces of work, literature, visual media. That's something that I'm actively trying to discourage other people from thinking. Like when my friends are asking, they'll just randomly ask people if they're a top or a bottom. I'm like, no, you can't do that. Like, what are you doing? Um, and
Turn
assuming,
it
oh,
around
you
and be
must
like,
be the
"What's your
top,
favorite position?"
right? Or they're like, oh, you must be the man. And I'm like, oh, we did not go there. We did not go there. And so that's maybe why I'm getting a bit uncomfortable when she describes Ilya only as manly because it reminds me of
Mm,
these conversations that I'm
mm,
having now with people.
yeah.
And as we progress through the book, like in chapter 5, there are really sweet nods to Game Changer. Like they talk
Mhm.
about Shane's morning routine and making a smoothie. And I'm like, oh, okay. Had I not read Game Changer, I would have missed that reference.
Yeah, yeah. There's lots of little cute things in it that sort of remind you of like Scott and Kip exists in his universe. And you will start now seeing reoccurring characters. Ilya, you're going to get very familiar with. He loves to pop in and out of people's books. So yeah, I like the little cameos, and it's one of the best things about having this sort of shared universe. But you can read these books as standalones. The only one that you really can't read as a standalone is Long Game, because you need the context of Shane and Ilya. But the rest of them you can, but you always get like little Easter eggs of characters coming in, and you're like, oh, they're back again, and that's so nice. And wow, yeah. So yeah, it's nice. It's a nice little aspect whenever you're reading the books.
It is, and I like these little Easter eggs, these little points of reference, because if you haven't read them, you would have missed them. Now, I want to get your take on chapter 6 when
Hmm.
they're at the press conference and the journalists are asking both Illy and Shane sort of questions and reading off these questions. It's quite different to the TV show in that there's not this obvious discomfort for Ilya because of a language barrier that we see in the TV show. In the book, his responses are actually really funny.
Yeah,
Like,
yeah,
he makes light of some of the things that they ask him.
yeah. It's whenever it starts to get a bit too complicated for him. It's like whenever he's being delivered too much information, and he makes it clear that he believes it's like discriminatory as well. That it's just like one journalist always asks him like a really stupidly overly complicated question, and then that's when Shane sort of rescues him. Then when he can't do the quick back and forth, and he can't do the quick humor, that sort of usually gets him out of that situation. Um, and it sort of goes to show how much Shane is watching Ilya, because Shane seems to realize that when Ilya is struggling with like an answer, he'll use humor to deflect, which is what he does. But when it becomes too complicated and it's a bit too hard for Ilya to do that, Shane knows then I'm going to step in and save him from embarrassing himself. That's
Exactly.
interesting. Yeah.
And we suddenly get that on the TV show, but I did not get that read from the book. I didn't get the impression that Shane was trying to rescue Ilya from a complicated question or an uncomfortable question. Ilya
Hmm.
just very much deflects, and maybe it is a defense, as you were talking, like he uses his humor sort of deflecting in a
Hmm.
way, but I didn't get the read that Shane was rescuing Ilya here. You see Ilya being anxious, and I was listening to the Shelf Aware podcast with Ren and Lizzie, who we've had
Yeah.
on, and they talk a lot about how Ilya as a character will like rub his temples and things like that when he's anxious. And what I notice in the book is he doesn't do that specifically, so it's different in the book. Here he rubs
Mm.
his knuckles, or he rubs the knuckle of his thumb or something like that. And that's
Yeah.
how I knew that he was anxious during that sort of setup with the journalists.
Yeah, and I think that's like also a benefit of being able to deliver something through the visual medium again. Like you can, like body language. Like you're obviously you have your psychological background. Of course, you're going to know how to read body language, but most people understand that we have little small nonverbal communication things that we do with our bodies that help us say to somebody that we're feeling a certain way. Because we're seeing it on screen, we don't need to be told that Ilya is feeling anxious or he seems anxious or it's shown to us that he is like he's bit awkward, sort of playing with his hands. He's fidgeting. So he is. He's
Yeah.
fidgeting and he's self-soothing. And you do that when you're anxious. So that's portrayed to us in that way. And you can also see how Shane is able to see it because we can see it. And I like that little detail. So yeah, it's just another one of those sort of benefits of being able to translate this into a different medium.
Yeah. I wanted to ask what you thought about the sex scene, the first sort of sex scene that we see from Ilya and Shane,
The shower scene is like the prelude to what could happen. So it is. It's like they're sussing each other out rather than propositioning each other. That's the big
Exactly.
difference. And
Yeah.
it also it doesn't build up the anticipation, which the show 100% does, and it's like, oh, this is so cheeky, this is crazy. But yeah, I do though understand that it's a bit more innocent, perhaps, in book, reflects more of their inexperience. Um, so yeah, that's I think that's just the only real difference, to be honest.
Yeah. And it's interesting that, in the book, when they come out of the shower, in the TV show, we see Ilya draped in the towel, right?
Yeah,
Looking very sort of, I want to say, peacocky.
yeah.
Whereas in the book, it's the other way around. Shane is the one who comes out in the towel. Ilya's already sitting down. And
Mhm.
it's just interesting. I wonder what purpose that serves, actually. Why did they
Mm.
switch that character? Why do they switch the characters so that Ilya in the TV show is the one who's in the towel and in the book it's Shane?
Because it's a way of showing Ilya as this temptation to Shane. By having him in the tile readily there, he's showing off, he's flexing, he's doing the whole bit. And Shane's resolve suddenly goes straight out the fucking window, which is completely understandable. Whereas in the book, you sort of lose that aspect of it. It puts the ball more in Shane's court to do whatever he wants. And so he more talks himself into it, where whenever you see it on the TV show, it's like, oh my God, you didn't stand a chance, did you? So I think it's a way of showing that Ilya has more power in this dynamic. He's more experienced. He has an idea of what he's doing. He knows what he wants. And it feels less like it's an even playing ground. Whereas in the book, it does feel like these two are a bit, they're kind of on the same wavelength. It's even though there's big talk about how Ilya has all this experience sexually, it comes across more in the book that it's a bit more of an even playing ground.
Yeah.
Is that the right way of saying that? So
Yes.
it's more balanced in that sense. So I think the TV show decides to go for a different dynamic between the two, where you have someone
There's a
who's much more experienced, emotionally withdrawn, and another one who's trying to figure out his emotions and figure out
de-
where he fits here.
and I think one of the things you talked about this a little bit about Shane's inner monologue being, or both really, both the inner monologues being quite evident and being quite sort of clear. And one thing that I definitely got within the first 8 chapters was the sheer gay panic for Shane. And we've all been there, you know. Do I like him? No, I don't. Am I gay? No, I'm not. Like, why do I like him? Why is he so hot? And I think that's so authentic, and it's so I loved reading those parts for Shane.
Yeah, it is like it's that experience of being like, "Oh God, you can't be serious. What is it about this guy? Why am I feeling like this? Like, I can't stop looking at him. Like, this is really bad. Like, what is wrong with me? Oh my God, do I actually like this person? Oh shit, I fucking like this person. Uh, fuck." And it's captured really, really well, where we don't get that in the show, which is that's sad. Where's the gay panic? Maybe obviously it's probably internally happening and and it's more subtle. But we're missing just that good one of like, yeah. So
I
to be honest, because you've not read the end of this book, I can't talk about the freak out that Shane has compared to the show. So
okay,
I'm gonna put a pin on that.
it's
So
coming.
I think
Because
it's
you're right. In the TV show, we see that conversation they have on the bed, like you won't tell anyone kind of thing. But that's as far as it goes in the TV show,
yeah,
really. Whereas in the book, I just maybe because I could relate, and I'm like, oh yeah, oh yeah, you're down
yeah.
bad. Like this the beginning.
Yeah, no, he's definitely battling himself more in the book. So he's battling his sexuality a lot more in the book, whereas in the TV show it's not as evident. Um, which, you know, there was a lot to fit in. So can't do everything.
Definitely. Definitely. And so when we come on to chapter 7, then, so I'm going to ask you a question. What did you make of Shane not wanting Ilya to come to his house? Because he does in the TV show.
I think it's a way of keeping him emotionally distant. I think Shane views his home as like a safe space, as a place where he goes to relax. And he does mention it throughout the book that he does enjoy like the comfort of his home, and he has his books that he reads, and he's a you know he's very organized, very relaxed, and this is like a safe space for him, basically. And by inviting Ilya into that, it's delivering a message, which is I feel attached and emotionally connected to you in a way that I feel like you're welcome here now. You're not making this an unsafe space. You're actually adding to the comfort. And so it would be a very bad sign for Shane if he is that emotionally attached to Ilya that he feels comfortable inviting him to his home. And
Yeah,
it's
I
actually,
agree.
I think in the book, it's kind of what prompts Shane to buy property in the first place. Like, I think he literally buys that apartment block for them specifically. Whereas in the book, it's like it's convenient that I was buying, or in the show, sorry, it's convenient that I was buying this property as an investment because now we can go here instead. Whereas in the book, I think it's more clear that Shane literally buys an entire apartment block just for the two of them to sleep together.
I mean, that's an expense. That's an expense. I don't know how you justify that to your accountant.
It's a good investment. The excuse in the book comes afterwards. In the show, it's
Yeah,
before. So it is. It's like, oh, it's a convenience. Whereas he needs to
yeah,
make up an excuse when it's in the book, which is funnier.
yeah, definitely, definitely. I mean, I agree. I felt like there was this avoidance. It was almost like having Ilya in his house was going to be too intimate, but having his cock in his mouth isn't.
Yeah, because that's
Make that
just
make
physical.
sense.
That doesn't mean anything. That's physical. It doesn't mean anything. So by inviting him into his home, like that's like boyfriend material. That's like a date. Like that's different. So he has
Right.
to create a separate space where he can keep these two aspects of his life completely separate. Because if they come together, then it's going to create a lot of complex problems he doesn't want to deal with.
Yeah. And you suddenly see in this chapter, you we talked about the gay panic before, like in the showers and stuff like that, and here you definitely get the sense of what I call, and I don't know what this is really called, so please educate me out there if you're listening. I call it the bottoming panic, where you're like, how is that going to fit in me?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. Yeah, I think it's because for him it seems quite new, so he's never had like a thought to contextualize it, um, or like tried anything to this point. So I think it's an entirely new experience for him. I don't think he's like gone near these feelings before. You get the idea that Shane in the show is sort of aware that he's gay from like a young age. He sort of knows. He's just fighting it. Whereas
Mm,
in the book, it feels more like a recent discovery. Like this is
yeah,
brand new. I had no
yeah.
idea I was going to be attracted to men. And well, fuck, it's what? No, you are. So you better start figuring this shit out quick because you have a lot of knowledge you need to catch up on if you're going to feel like you're ready.
And this is why I say that for Shane, Ilya is his gay awakening, because he's not really
Mm.
had these thoughts prior to that. And we see in this chapter language that I'm not sure how it landed with me in a similar way to, in the previous couple of chapters where I had issues with Ilya being described as manly. We see that there's a scene here with Shane and Ilya, and Shane describes himself as wanting to throw his head back against the wall like an eager slut.
Mm.
Now, I don't know how much language like this is used in other books. And I'm not saying that there's a judgment around this language, but for me, I don't know how I feel about Shane calling himself an eager slut for enjoying sex or wanting sex with
Mm.
Ilya. It
Yeah,
didn't quite it didn't quite
didn't
land well
land right.
with me.
Mm.
And I don't know whether, and we've already identified in Game Changer, I'm a lot more prudish than I thought I was. But there seems to be this shame or judgment surrounding this, which I didn't think was warranted unless I'm reading it wrong.
It's I think the reason why you're finding particular issue with it is that it's tonally inconsistent. Like it's not really the way Shane talks, so it's not. Um, it seems out of place. Um, and because this is Shane's first experience with a man, you can imagine that when he hears the word slut, he's referring it to like a previous image he has of like a woman, maybe. Because I think sometimes when we say that word, there is like an idea and an assumption that we're talking about like a woman. Um, but I think it's more to do just the fact that it's tonally inconsistent with the sort of thing that we're running with here. It's more like something that maybe Ilya might come out with, not really a shame. And so it does feel out of place. Like there's other books where like you do have characters like that, and I'm like, yeah, you would definitely say that. Like, but it's all like they're in the moment, like they're talking about themselves. They're really like darker
In the
characters.
heat of
Like,
it.
yeah, they're in the heat of the moment, and it's like it's something that they would say, like the song that they would view themselves as, and it's like part of their kink, and it's all this. For Shane, it just doesn't really make sense. It doesn't really belong in here. Take it out. I don't want to.
Yeah, I'm just wondering what the incentive of using that was. Like, it's almost like one of them calling the other daddy or something. It just felt weird.
Yeah, it's just out of place. It's just tonally wrong for his character and where they're at this point in time. So, no, I think it was just a poorly placed word, let's say.
Yeah, I'm not sure
Comes
why I'm
from
having such a reaction. Maybe I'm the only one, but if you have another thought, if anyone's listening, or you have a reaction yourself, like let us know. It's just I had that reaction
mm,
because that word feels quite derogatory, especially in this day and age. And
mm,
when it's used as a slur or an insult. It's not used in a oh you're such a slut. It's you're a slut, like you
mm,
know you're promiscuous, you're a harlot. I don't know. I think
yeah.
for me, I just responded badly to it.
Mm,
Yeah, and then we get to chapter 8, and this concludes sort of that part one
yeah.
part of the book. And what I found really interesting this in this chapter was, this is for anyone who hasn't read it in a while or is sort of following along. This is where they have and they call it the NHL awards. I think they call it the MHL awards in the TV show. I can't remember.
Something like that,
But
yeah.
this is where, yeah, something like that. And this is where Shane wins Rookie of the Year and Ilya doesn't.
Yeah.
And you get this rooftop scene. In the book, it's different. In the book, there's a bar at the top, and that's where Shane goes to. He's looking for Ilya initially, but he just goes up to the bar. And then
hmm
opposite the bar, there's this sort of open plan space in the book. And so that's where he ends up finding Ilya just by chance, in a way, in the book.
Yeah.
But to me, this whole when Ilya declares it's not all about you, Hollander, there's no context in the book by which we know in the TV show Ilya's dad is ill. We know something's wrong, and he's
hmm
preoccupied about that. He says, "I have to go to
mm,
Russia in like 3 days or whatever." And so in the
yeah.
book, Ilya's outburst doesn't make sense in a way.
Mm. Yeah. Because we don't have the context as to why he's behaving like that. Um, I think it does paint an image of Ilya that he is not always like emotionally rational when he's well, like in the way he's behaving. It shows immaturity. And in the book, I do find it Ilya is more immature. And the sort of way he goes on and the way he sort of like eggs on other players as well is a lot sort of more childish in the book, I think. I think he riles everybody up for no real particular reason, whereas in the show it seems a bit more strategic. It seems like a reason to sort of just like rile up the other team, make them make mistakes or whatever. But in the book it's more obvious Ilya's a bit of an asshole. it's
Right.
he definitely is. Like he's characterized more in that way. Like he is more of a dick. But I think that does come out here a little bit, and we can assume that the same thing has happened, where Ilya has had a bad experience since released to his family. It's not really about shame, but it doesn't quite land the same way because we don't have that context right now, which is a shame because Um, we have a dual POV, so we could have got that. Um,
Yeah. I mean, we get
so
a little bit. We get that call with Alexi, and it's like, what's going on kind of thing. And I think in the TV show, it really links it much more saliently
stronger,
that there's
yeah.
something
Stronger
wrong
link,
with his
yeah.
father. And that's
Mm,
what leads to that outburst. Like, it's not all about you. And
yeah.
again, this is where sound, inflection of voice, because I
Mhm.
watched the TV show, I really felt that outburst. Whereas I think if I had just read the book, it didn't read like an outburst. It just read like a statement.
Well, let me put it this way. When I read the book, that moment was like, it was not like a moment for me. It was just like they met and Ilya got a bit annoyed at him. Like it wasn't this memorable thing that it became.
Yeah.
Because it's such a pivotal scene in um such a pivotal scene in the show because it shows that Ilya can be careless of Shane's feelings. Shane can also be a bit blind to Ilya's feelings as well, and he's not very good at reading him. And that Ilya is dealing with a lot of family pressure, and his family is a much bigger presence in the show than it is in the book. It's a
Mm.
much bigger issue and present within the plot. Whereas in the book, you'll find that that's not true. It's still there, but it's definitely not a huge plot point, even though it's so central to Ilya's character and who he is at this moment. So yeah, I think there's a lot in that. It was definitely turned into something bigger in the show because it was a good moment to show a bit of characterization in how this relationship is sort of a bit messy, and how these two don't really know each other properly. So yeah, you were right to pick it up. It is different for a reason. Yeah.
Yeah. And do you know how I know there's so much more content that we're talking about? Because I mean, I think we've done a Ren and Lizzie from the Shelfaware
Oh, we have
podcast, and that
100%.
we've dissected like 8 chapters, and we've talked for over an hour about this. And I think it aligns with maybe the story that we're interested in, maybe the story that a lot of people are interested in, but also that what we're getting from the writing as well. And I feel like there is a shift from Game Changer to Heated Rivalry, the book.
Hmm. Yeah, I think so. Yeah, I think this is a better book, definitely. I think Rachel Reed's more experienced a writer in this one, and she's making better decisions and writing more interesting characters with a lot more depth, and realism as well. Like these characters feel way more real than the relationship between Scott and Kip ever did. And their struggle is much more compelling as well. Like there's a build up, there's real purpose, there's structure to this thing that really does make sense. And while you will find that it does have its flaws, it's still a very entertaining, competently written piece of work. That was perfect for adaptation. So yeah, there we go. We're off to a strong start.
Yeah, so bear with us. We are going to take our time with this, only because there is so much. And there is a lot of comparison to the TV show that we're going to be making because of the way it's structured. And honestly, I'm just a slow reader, so I'm really taking my time with this. Like, if you're part of the book club, you'll already see that we have surpassed Heated Rivalry. What book are we on in the book club now, Declan?
We're on Common Goal, which is
Right.
Eric and Kyle, I think. Yeah, that one's interesting for anyone that really, really did like Game Changer and liked Kip and Scott, because they're still a big part of that book too. So there's lots to look forward to.
Yeah. And, join us on Fable. Um, I tend to read back through the comments and add stuff later on as I'm catching up with the books. But you know where we're at. Declan is very adept at keeping up and sort of managing that pace. So do find us on Fable. It's called Long Game Podcast. I'll also put all the description links below.
But thank you so much for joining us. That was part one of our dissection of the Heated Rivalry book and how it sort of compares to the show. If you like this, make sure you like, subscribe, share it with anyone you think will enjoy it. Also, check us out on Fable. We have a book club going where we're going through the entire series. At the minute, we're on the fourth book, but all the original discussions are still on there too. So if you want to drop in and maybe catch up on some of that stuff and some of those discussions, then definitely do. It's called the Long Game Podcast Book Club. So check that out. That's on Fable again. And we're also available on multiple platforms as well: Spotify, Apple, YouTube, Amazon, the whole lot. So check us out, share us with your friends, and we'll see you for part 2.